All this area containing the Ebor Brewery site is known as the Old Walk and is scheduled for selective redevelopment. One particular part of it is of extreme archaeological interest. It's this, the Bedern area. This is our special case, where it's been possible to plan for an extended digging campaign of 2 or 3 seasons, as against the hurried rescue excavations on the other sites. So far, this is the only part of this area to have been excavated. There are many difficulties, but to help solve them, and others like them, there's the Executive Committee, composed of members of the Trust and of York Corporation. The chairman of the committee is Professor Maurice Barley.
We now come to the question of the Old Walk development. Can you tell us precisely what is the area available in the present circumstances?
30 metres square.
Can you put this into context for us, Mr. Addiman?
Yes, well, the problem here is that we have negotiated over some time with the corporation for access to a sample area of the Old Walk site, which is some 16 acres, due for selective redevelopment. And we've come to the conclusion that archaeologically this was the most useful area. It contains remains of the medieval college of the Vicars Choral, possibly a Saxon church, and we know there are extensive Roman remains of the legionary fortress below. Now, we propose to spend perhaps 2 years before the Old Walk scheme gets going doing a careful, orderly excavation. We therefore put in an application recently to the Planning Committee for permission to do this and to have the buildings which are currently occupied by William Wrights removed from the site. Unfortunately, the Planning Committee and ultimately the full council felt that the buildings should be relet pending the site being developed. This seems to be a bit of a disaster. The project we anticipated there was a rather special one in which we did have a formal scheme in an orderly manner rather than the usual incredible rush we're faced with, and it's a site that's perhaps as important as any in the country for the way in which it demonstrates a complete sequence in a vital area of York.
You say that this has gone not only to the planning committee but also to the full council. Is that so, Miss Hargreaves?
That is so.
Yes.
The planning committee, which is concerned about the redevelopment of this area, felt that the excavation work would perhaps interrupt the possibility of letting some of these buildings. I know the planning committee is very concerned about the neglected and derelict sites in York, and I think their feeling was that perhaps the Old Walk area would become such a site, and if the buildings could be used even on a temporary basis,
yes,
this would be to the advantage of the city.
The 2 areas discussed in the Executive Committee meeting are these. On one, the excavation has already started. On the other, it's hoped to start in the future. We'll have a look at the dig so far. Look at the gate in the wall. Beyond it, the present lane can be seen between the ancient buildings in the background. This lane was also there in the Middle Ages. You can see it on the excavated site where the 2 people are standing. In the centre of the picture are the foundations of houses which fronted the lane. The black area near the top of the picture was one of the kitchens. Peter Mills is the site supervisor.
This is the probable site of the kitchen of the house. You can see here a fireplace associated with the clay layer that came to about here is lying on the charcoal floor. The hearth itself was destroyed later, and you can see up this end another small oven that has also been partially destroyed. The actual floor down here is probably a result of the rake-out from the various fires in the area, and of course it's the thick charcoal deposit is a result. Up here we have another small hearth which has been destroyed with 2 small stake holes showing where a wooden hood at one point covered it. Over here the whole kitchen has in fact been cut by a car inspection pit.
That was the part we've been allowed to dig so far. A large part of the Bedern area consists of the college of the Vicars Choral, and this is the part that is lying underneath the present buildings. So now let's have a look at the greater possibilities afforded by the more formal layout of the Vicars Choral. This existed on a small street which is still here through this archway.
Well, I'm now standing here in the College of the Vicar's Choral, which in the Middle Ages was a college of minster priests, with the gatehouse in front of me, and you can see here the remains of the medieval chapel. And over behind the chapel, there are still the remains of the medieval hall, surviving in the middle of factory premises. Behind me, the street here was, in the Middle Ages, an enclosed court with 36 small houses of the priests grouped around it. This is a particularly interesting area to excavate if we're given permission, because we hope we may be able to recover the complete plan of the whole college. All the 36 houses, the gardens, the orchards behind them, as well as the hall and the kitchen and the chapel, because we've got a great many property deeds going right back to the 13th century for this area, so that it should be possible to have a really well-integrated dig with archaeological and historical evidence.
The property deeds for the Vicar's Choral are still in existence. They are kept in the Minster Library.
The Bedern was very well documented compared to most parts of York. There are a great many leases and property deeds that help us to establish just where all the buildings used to be in the college. Here, for instance, we have a lease of 1765 by which the vicars were leasing a dwelling house that's very precisely described as being on the south side of the chapel, situate within the Bedern, and giving the other borders of the property down to the Bedern Hall, so that we can work out from this lease just where the house ought to be that we should excavate for. We can, in fact, go back much further than this by way of property documents. If we take, for instance, this description of the Bedern in 1276, which is the earliest mention of the college, we find here that it is explained that the Bedern is of the land of Blessed Peter, that is the Minster, and it tells us just when the various parts of the Bedern were given to the vicars, and tells us also about some extra bits of property between the Bedern and Aldwark, which were given to them afterwards. We're not quite yet able to say just where all of these bits of property were, but it should be possible from the mess of documents and working backwards to establish the precise location of all of them.